enlightenment, which is the exhaustion of the karma that keeps propelling the wheel of samsara. And I give the analogy of a car with gasoline. Okay, if you have a car, as long as you keep putting petrol, gasoline in the tank, then it keeps going. But when you stop putting gas in the tank, it goes for a while, but when all the gas runs out of the tank, what happens? The car stops, right? So the car, in this sense, is our bodies. And the gas that we're putting into the tank is greed, hatred, and delusion. And the karmic energy that we create through that. So when we gradually weaken ignorance, and this is where the reversed order of paticca samuppada plays its role, depending on, with the cessation of ignorance comes the cessation of the volitional formations. The volitional formations basically is the karma, the accumulated karma. With the cessation of the volitional formations, consciousness ceases. That means it doesn't produce any more relinking consciousness at the time of death of an arahant. And so there's no more birth of any physical bodies, and the consciousness is basically liberated. So that in that way you can actually use the paticca samuppada as a kind of to contemplate it in that way. If you know the 12 links, I didn't mention them all in order, but you can easily find that. That you can go over those in the forward order and then the reverse order, and kind of, seeing if, at least a part of accumulating karma, you can see how that, directly, affects your life and has been affecting your life. But you think about it over and over again, and gradually your doubts about it become overcome. The doubts that there is some I or self that's been controlling that. Because the belief in a self is one of the fetters. And along with this, there's something called the 10 fetters that keep them. A fetter is like a chain, like a criminal gets put on the handcuffs, right? So that's a fetter. He can't move his hands. So there's 10 fetters that keep our mind chained to the wheel of birth and death. And the major one is the Sakkaya Ditthi, or the self-view, the personality view, thinking that I am the owner, controller, and the doer of this body and mind. We've already talked about that to some extent. But still, people still have doubts about it because it's such a deeply ingrained thing. But by going over and over again, like the contemplating paticca samuppada, and seeing how this process, even in this life, you're not even a controller. What have you controlled in this life? When you look at it. Well, I decided to take a trip to France. Did you? Was it really you that decided? If you think back, there were so many causes and conditions that made you decide to do anything. Even in my case, people ask, why did you decide to become a monk? I tell them, I didn't decide. Karma decided. I didn't decide. I might have thought I was deciding to do this and that, but there were so many different underlying causes and conditions that we're actually creating the conditions that that's going to happen. Not that I was in the actual control of it. But it's wisdom that's in control. It's either wisdom or ignorance. If the ignorance is predominant, then that control will lead to more suffering. But if the wisdom starts to arise, then that wisdom is what wants to seek a way out. And that wisdom starts working for you in unexplained ways. So, like in my own example that I give, like when I was young, I wanted to go to India. But not to find a guru or not to study religion. I was a hippie in those days. I heard that in India, there's lots of good hashish and lots of, beaches, and you can live naked on the beach, and all these hippie dreams, right? So so that's what got me interested to go to India. But it was like holding a carrot in front of a donkey. The donkey, trying to get the carrot, and you keep pulling it away. And it will keep following the carrot. So on the surface of my mind, I thought I was going to India for that. But in the course of going there, I had all kind of different experiences. I even got busted and put in prison in Afghanistan for trying to smuggle hashish. Almost died. Could have got killed there. And when I got out, I said, I gotta change my mind. And then when I got into Nepal, I heard about the chance to go to a meditation course. And something inside almost like leaped out of my chest saying, God, I gotta do that. That's what I gotta do. But it wasn't me deciding to do it. It was just a very powerful type of thing. So I went to the meditation course and learned the Dhamma and had a very powerful experience. And one of them was meditating on Paticca it was very, powerful. And it totally changed my life. But I'm just saying that as an example. And that's why I knew I went to India. Then I realized this is why I've come to India, not for the other things. But I wouldn't have come to India had you said, come for religion. So it created this ruse, It created this smokescreen to lure me there. But underneath, there was already something, a destiny waiting, you could say. So that's the way a lot of the karma works. It works on unconscious ways. But when you start knocking on the door, there's a saying in Christianity, when you knock on the door that Jesus will come or whatever. It's the same, that's a truism, even within the Dhamma. When you start to awaken and begin the spiritual search, things start happening for you. And you may think you're deciding even to come to this retreat. No, you didn't decide. It's your karma decided. Something inside said, this is what I need to do. Let's go with it. And everyone has, you can probably think of many examples in your life where similar type of thing like that worked, right?
Yes.
Even if it's mundane things. So this is all part of understanding, trying to overcome the idea of a self, that it's a me or a self that's actually deciding to do things, but to understand everything in terms of karma and cause and effect. And so that's the way that you can help do, that's one of the ways of the purification by overcoming doubts about it. And so contemplating that. But I wanted to read a very nice little, I guess you could call it a poem, but it's from the Visuddhimagga. It kind of illustrates that. About the body and mind. They cannot come to be by their own strength, or yet maintain themselves by their own strength, relying for support on other states. Weak in themselves and form, they come to be. They come to be with others as condition. They are aroused by others as their objects. They are produced by objects and condition, and each by something other than itself. And just as men depend upon a boat for traversing the sea, so does the mental body need the matter body for occurrence. And as the boat depends upon the men for traversing the sea, so does the matter body need the mental body for occurrence. Depending each upon the other, the boat and men go across the sea. And so do mind and matter depend one upon the other. And there's another nice one. Suffering alone, it is suffering alone that arises, it's suffering that remains, it's suffering that departs. Nothing comes and goes except the ill, which means the impermanence. In other words, there's no self that's coming and going. Yes. The mental and material are really here, but there is no human being to be found, for it is void and merely fashioned like a doll, just suffering piled up like grass and sticks. Now I know to the average person when they hear that, they think it sounds very negative, but that's why the Dhamma is something very deep and profound. So that purification by overcoming doubts is important, because doubts is also one of those three fetters. So I mentioned the three fetters, are the personality belief and doubts. And the second is attachment to rites and rituals. So those are called the three lower fetters that prevent a person from reaching the stream entry. Or when you reach stream entry, those three fetters are broken. So
I'm sorry to interrupt, I apologize. It's just that made me wonder, is it at this point that fetter is completely overcome? Or does that not...
I'll try to explain it.
I'm sorry, thank you, Bhante. Excuse me.
So the three fetters are the belief in a self, because that's what people, there's two types of beliefs about the self. One is the self is eternal, but that doesn't hold up to water, because if it was eternal, because people think the self was born in this life. So this life itself, according to that, a person is born and the soul is breathed into them. So that was their self starts then. And then it lives from now until eternity. What happened in the past? There was no self, then how can it be eternal? So it doesn't hold water in that argument. So one belief is the self is eternal. And when you die, it'll go on existing in a heaven or hell for eternity. The other is the self is now, but it'll be annihilated at the time of death. So that it doesn't matter what you do, eat, drink, and be merry, and do anything you want in the world, kill, cheat, lie, rape, pillage, and plunder, and there's no result of any karma, Because when you die, it's all going to go poof, with nothing to remain. So the Buddha rejected both of those extremes. That's what he called the two extremes. That everything exists eternally, or everything is annihilated with nothing left over now. But he took the middle path of that, yeah, the process goes on for a while, but it's not eternal, and it can be brought to an end with the attainment of enlightenment. But when you die now, the continuity of karma, continues. So, he took the middle path between those two extremes of everything exists or nothing exists. But the Buddha asked the question, how does it exist? Not that it exists or it doesn't, but how does it exist? It appears to exist, but how does it appear to exist? And so his explanation of the Dhamma is his way of explaining, how it existed through this process of paticca samuppada. It goes on, but it can also be brought to an end. So and so this you can actually think about. This is part of what is called Chintamaya Panya, or discursive thinking. Now, a lot of people think meditation, you sit down and you try to just block out all your thoughts by trying to concentrate at the tip of the nose or some other object, chanting a mantra. Or anyway, the belief is, or the imagination is, that you somehow block out all your thoughts. So thoughts are the enemy. Because even in Zen they say that thoughts are the enemy, thoughts are the enemy, kill your thoughts, kill your thoughts. Of course you can't, really. No. Because when you try to, they'll fight back. Like Muhammad Ali, they'll punch you right in the nose. Give you a bloody nose. If you try to forcibly stop your thoughts. So you have to understand how thoughts arise and to use the skillful means to undermine the causes and conditions for the thoughts arising. And when you undermine the causes and conditions, then they'll stop by themselves.
Become friends.
Or they can become your allies and so on. So, but anyway, the Chintamaya Panya, you could take that as a whole hour theme of meditation about karma. Just thinking about that, all the things that you've done in this life. What did you do driven by hatred or anger? What did you get in trouble because of lust, uncontrolled lust or greed? And what problems did you get because of your strong ego? You'll be surprised. There are hundreds and thousands of things. You probably, of course, you have to be honest. We tend to want to whitewash things. No, I didn't do that. Like when I wrote my book, right, my autobiography. How many people have read my autobiography? One Night Shelter. So it's like a tell-all book, right? I told everything I did in my life, including what I just mentioned before. Then when I was going to print the book in Sri Lanka, the guy who was editing the book said, "Oh, you shouldn't publish this book. It tells too many bad things about you." Well, that's the whole point. So we can change, right?
Yes.
But anyway, so you have to be honest about, and not to regret anything. Because you're a sum total right now of everything you've done in the past, basically. Even the bad things. But even the bad things can lead to good things too.
Yes.
And so we shouldn't be ashamed, unless we don't change. Then you should be ashamed. But if you use that to change yourself, then then that is a good thing. There's nothing to then lament or remorse about. But anyway, so, if you have a lot of thoughts and you're fighting yourself to push, don't. Think about the Dhamma. Use the thought. Like taking out a thorn with another thorn, right? If you get a thorn in yourself, you got to get out a sharp, hot needle and you have to dig the thorn out, right? But then it feels good after that. So the same way, we can use thought, right thought, to undermine wrong thought. So thinking about the Dhamma, it's called Dhammanupassana also. But it's called Dhamma Vichaya, investigation of Dhamma. So, like, just thinking about the law of karma, how it's affected you, how these things you did 5 or 10 years ago are still following you around, whether it's a good result or it's a painful result, and see how it was all driven by greed, hatred, and delusion, and the habits you've gotten you're still caught and stuck in so many habits, whether they're physical habits or they're mental habits. And also seeing how the body and mind are totally, dependent on each other. So you can actually think about that. And you can get very high in that thinking, actually. Because the first meditation course I took in Nepal was all about thinking. The Tibetan meditation course. They don't have you just practicing Anapana and try to quiet your mind, no. They give you topics to think about. But they're very powerful, and they can lead. You can gain access concentration by thinking, But it's directed thinking, and it pushes out all the other types of hindrances. So not all thinking is bad. So you can think. If you have lots of thoughts anyway, substitute those negative, useless thoughts for thinking about the Dhamma, and and then once you gain some clarity with that, even those thoughts will drop away and leave you in a kind of a silence. So anyway, these are just some additional things to keep in mind. And there's no harm in when you're meditating. Like, think about the 5 aggregates. That's why I say try to identify. Oh, this is material vibration. This is feeling. This is perception, the creation of objects out of empty vibrations. This is the reactions, and see how all of them are kind of a domino effect. And actually thinking about it. You get very high and very happy. In fact, Dhamma Vichaya is the second factor of enlightenment. In the 7 factors of enlightenment, the first one is mindfulness. The second is investigation of Dhamma, and it means investigating what the object is that's preoccupying your mind. Thinking about it. What is the cause of this? What is the cause of this lust that's arising? What is the cause of this anger that's arising? And you go back and you see, yes, there's been many things that led up to generating these things. And that is overcoming doubts. That is why this is part of the purification by overcoming the doubts. It's through that type of analysis. Now, does anybody have any questions based on that?
Yes, but I had a question. You mentioned the 3 impediments before stream and entry, doubt, believing on the eternal self, and
I didn't mention the last one, thank you.
and the rites and rituals.
Yes.
And so does it mean that when we bow to the Buddha, is it considered to be a ritual, a rite? Like, should we just not bow to the Buddha?
No, it depends on your mental state, what you think the Buddha means. And if you're bowing, if you think bowing alone is going to bring you enlightenment, or bowing alone is going to get you rebirth with Maitreya Buddha or something else, okay, then that's a rite and a ritual. But if you believe the Buddha image represents your own mind, the wisdom of your own mind, and you're saying you're humbling your ego in front of the symbol of enlightenment. So you're bowing because, go to Harvard and ask the PhDs to bow. What? Their egos prevent them from, what? I'm better than anybody else. I have more knowledge. Why should I bow to that student? That's why in Sri Lanka, parents bow to their kids who become a monk, don't they? If your son or daughter becomes a monk or a nun, the parents go bow to them because they're respecting that. Yes. Isn't that right, the Sri Lankan people?
Yeah.
Even the king went out and bowed to the 7-year-old Arahant. Anyway, so I'm just saying that it's the ego that prevents. So bowing is a way of humbling the ego. But it has to be done in the right way. So it's the ego that blocks our wisdom. And so by bowing as a way to open up to that. And so in that way, it wouldn't necessarily be a rite and a ritual. I mean, not all rites and rituals are necessarily bad, but if you think that that alone is going to lead you to enlightenment, then that's when it becomes an impediment. Like people think just bathing in the Ganges River, horribly polluted river, is going to guarantee them rebirth in heaven. Now that's a belief they have. And that's why they're doing it right now. This week is big Kumbh Mela in India.
Magical thing.
120 million people are going to that dirty river and bathing. With that belief that, so anyway, that's a rite and a ritual.
I've heard it described as magical thinking, like this idea that just by performing the ritual, like just the mere act of it is going to have some sort of...
Well, it may have some sort of an effect, but in terms of maybe to be reborn in a heaven, but not to get enlightenment itself. Mm-hmm. Maybe with the rite and ritual you could maybe influence being born in a Brahma realm or, in a two-seater heaven or so, but that's not enlightened.
Bhante, I have two questions. One is a Dhamma question, the other one is a walking meditation question. So the Dhamma question is about the volitional formations in Paticcasamuppada. So one of the things, at least one would not know is the powerful volitions in their previous births and it can carry on to the, the current birth. So until the grasping stage, probably may happen very fast and then you probably would not even realize. So I'm just wondering, these unskillful type volitions, results in unskillful type actions. What's the best way to tone it down so the momentum is reduced?
By seeing your intentions before you've done those actions. You have to see the intention. And so there's a desire to, let's say, tell a lie. You have to see that intention and you have to recognize that intention as being akusala, something unwholesome. And then you have to generate enough wisdom or energy to replace that desire to tell a lie with the telling the truth. You have to substitute another thing for that one to drive it out. Otherwise, you probably will just wind up going ahead and doing it. So the wisdom has to override the ignorance. That's why wisdom is very important. And the right understanding, even if it's just intellectual understanding, that helps. But then as you meditate, that intellectual understanding turns to a deeper level of kind of more reflective understanding. Then that in turn becomes the wisdom that comes out of the deep insights that result in attaining the 4 stages of enlightenment. So, it's the mindfulness. Without mindfulness is recognizing whatever kind of thought is coming up in your mind. And it has to be conjoined with wisdom, not just being mindful. But then the right understanding says this intention, this thought is unwholesome because it's motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion. But, you might say, yeah, I know that, but anyway, I'll do it anyway. Okay, well, then your wisdom wasn't strong enough. So you have to generate enough wisdom that's going to count, to see the happiness in wisdom. You have to see the happiness that wisdom gives you, because it's happiness that the mind is after. If you get more happiness in telling lies than you would in telling the truth, then you'll continue telling lies. So you have to experience the happiness and peace of mind that comes from doing kusala, the wholesome actions. And that will be the power that gives you the success in weakening the unskillful ones. Because the mind that's what it's after. It's after the pursuit of happiness. And if you don't know a higher happiness, it's just going to go to the gross, lower forms of happiness: food, sex, sleep, whatever. But when you start getting the happiness of meditation and the quiet mind and the happiness that comes from insights and getting glimpses of the higher truths, that is a higher happiness, because you see that is more permanent. And these lower forms of happiness always entail striving, and repeating all these negative things and compounding all the difficulties in your lives. Like somebody who's addicted to gambling, might get happiness out of winning a jackpot, and then then he loses $3 or $4 million $1,000 and all of his family's food money and other things like that, just with the hope of winning one horse race or something else, and gets happiness out of that. But then he got all this misery, and he keeps on, the life just gets totally ruined. Plus all their family's life and so many other people. And that's the force of ignorance, because these people are not interested in wisdom, because they haven't been taught. No one teaches it. So that's the problem. Anyway, we want to still